The executive S&OP process is the mechanism for senior management to set the supply chain flow rates for their organization. After the flow rate is set, the rest of the organization can use all their tools and knowledge to execute. Thus, once the senior management realized they had a role to play, it became obvious to them that they needed to support the people, development, and changes required to execute their plans. Sounds pretty simple in retrospect, but at the time, it drove a major change in DBM. The demand plan. Prior to the implementation of S&OP, the demand plan was often owned by operations as they had the historical data. They took historical shipment data, combined this with open customer orders, the backlog, looked at their production capability, and developed a shipment plan. The process worked if future plans looked like history. However, most companies had a sales organization that saw the world differently. They really could not understand why operations could not meet their requirements. This often resulted in conflict between sales and operations. It was clear that the sales organization needed to own the demand plan. As we moved demand planning to sales, some issues became apparent. The first issue was the definition of demand. Historically, the demand plan was stated in terms of future shipments. However, for a shipment to happen, the company needed to have the order, and it also needed to have the product. When operations controlled the demand plan and the supply plan, this was accounted for. When we moved demand planning to the sales side of the house, they could not accept accountability for having the product. It was clear that the demand plan had to be stated as a booking plan or an unconstrained shipment plan. Secondly, managing the backlog as a buffer became a critical input to the process. If bookings are higher than shipments, then the open customer orders or backlog increases. If the backlog increases, the lead time increases, and at some point the company may not be competitive. Establishing the correct targets and tolerances for the backlog became an important part of the demand planning process. As S&OP developed, it became clear that sales should own the bookings, operation should own supply, and that the shipment plan, the constrained shipment plan, was an output of the S&OP process owned by senior management. With S&OP, it became possible to set realistic monthly flow rates for bookings, supply, and shipments, and clearly identify who was responsible for what portion of the plan. Let's start with the CEO or COO, the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operating Officer of the organization. The Chief Operating Officer of the company has a critical role to play. This position is typically highlighted as critical for any major change project that impacts culture, crosses departments, and or requires significant resource. So it seems only normal that we would highlight it as critical for S&OP. However, for S&OP, this role is different. The CEO is not just a sponsor and supporter of the process. He or she actually has a significant role to play in the monthly cycle. In fact, managing the S&OP process should become one of the primary executive management functions. Let's look at some of the tasks the CEO performs monthly. 1. Review the S&OP plan prior to the executive S&OP meeting. The CEO needs to review the plan and check that it makes sense. In the book, you would have seen the checklist for the plan, page 71. This is the checklist that the CEO should go through for each family prior to the S&OP meeting. For review, let's look at it again. Step 1. Review history, last month's performance to plan. Circle out of tolerance and expect answers. Step 2. Check for major changes in future bookings, shipment, and supply plans, and circle ones that need explaining. 2A. Check future plans jive with last month's story. 2B, check for major changes in the current year expected, CYE, and the rolling 12. 2C, check the CYE to budget. 2D, check for big changes in future months. 2E, compare aged backlog to shipment plan. Is it realistic? Step 3, monitor the buffers. Compare planned backlog to target, compare the planned inventory to target, and if the buffers are not on target, be prepared to ask why. Step 4, check if plans are realistic using history as an indicator. As a result, the CEO should clearly understand the story for each family every month. This may seem like a lot of work, but actually it only takes 2 or 3 minutes per family to do it. Second monthly task is be prepared to make a decision on the constrained shipment plan if sales and operations could not reach agreement in the pre-S&OP meeting, or if you feel their decision needs modification. Thirdly, approve major changes to resources, capital expenditures, manpower changes, significant changes to purchases, and changes to the targets for inventory and backlog buffers. And fourthly, be prepared to defend the plan to corporate. These are the CEO's monthly accountabilities in the early phases of S&OP maturity. As the process expands to include the financial linkages, the strategic plan linkage, and the new product introduction plans, these tasks will expand accordingly. VP Sales and Marketing. The VP of Sales or Senior Sales Executive owns the unconstrained demand process. The unconstrained demand process includes the bookings plan, the current aged backlog, and the unconstrained shipment plan. This is what sales thinks the marketplace wants. It is important that sales is looking at demand unconstrained. Operations must deal with the constraints, but before they can do that, they need to know what the unconstrained demand is. If, based on the pre-S&OP supply meeting, the shipment plan must be constrained, then it is the accountability of the VP of Sales to determine where the constraints should be applied. In this condition, often referred to as allocation, it should be the role of sales to determine who gets how much of the constrained output. Operations owns the total output number, but sales owns who gets it. In addition, sales owns how to execute the allocation. Will there be price increases, lead time increases, or some other strategy? The VP of Sales must also hold his or her people accountable for meeting their part of the demand plan. Individual sales representatives will be held accountable for their plans at the family level. This is often a shift in sales, though, as many sales reps only look at their plan in terms of total dollars and not units by family. The VP of Sales chairs the pre-S&OP demand meeting. At this meeting, the unconstrained demand plans are finalized and approved by the VP of Sales. In addition, he or she must attend the pre-S&OP meeting. If the plan must be constrained, then this is the meeting where it will be dealt with. Finally, the VP of Sales must attend the executive S&OP meeting to address demand-related questions. There will be times when the VP of Sales cannot attend all of the required meetings in the monthly cycle. In these cases, there must be an alternate who takes this role. The alternate must have the capability to make the required decisions in the absence of the VP of Sales. Typically, there will be someone working with the VP of Sales who does all the legwork for demand planning,